It's crazy how many times that you have people in different positions, and we all could deal with this, where we can't list the way you did the 3 or 4 core things we're supposed to be doing. It's already hard enough dealing with all the problems when you have those things listed, but if you don't have those things listed, then I would guess what dictates most of your time and most of your day each day is basically just whatever's coming at you.
Exactly.
You know, this problem, this email, and you need to be able to say and identify, hey, if I'm not doing X this week, here is the thing that I know if I don't do it, nobody else is doing it.
This is Breaking Barriers, where we help pastors and churches grow so that they can go.
All right. Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Breaking Barriers podcast. So today I am very excited about the topic that we are going to be getting into. I'm Pastor Bobby, and this is Pastor Andrew. Today we're going to be talking about really a topic that can apply to just your personal leadership, and hopefully it's very value add for you, but also could just apply to kind of leadership in a broader perspective. And it's really just kind of looking at in a church, in your leadership role, like what do you do when there's more to do than you can actually do? And how can you basically focus on the things that are right for you to be doing and that God wants you to be doing, and leading out of the vision of what your role kind of requires of you? And then obviously in ministry, you have all of these requests coming at you at all times, right? And it's a little bit of a two-edged sword with even the size of the church, because in the beginning, you don't have as much staff, right? So maybe more of that stuff is coming at you. But then as the church grows, you have more staff, but there's also more people that the church is connected to. And so we share this podcast with you guys, not because we are experts at this, probably because we have failed at this, more times than not, being a part of a church that's grown from 30 people to 3,000 people and all the changes that come with that, and constantly having to go back to, man, how do we focus on the things that are most important and lead out of vision? So I'll kind of let you kind of start us off talking about, what that looks like from a lead pastor position. And then I could talk about maybe what it looks like from some different roles in the church.
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the first things that comes to my mind is we use a lot of strengths finder language here, and it's trying to figure out how to be a maximizer, even if you don't have maximizer in your strengths, right? So I don't have maximizer. Maximizer they can look at the slate of all the stuff you're talking about and say, that doesn't matter, that doesn't matter, that does matter, that doesn't matter, that doesn't matter, that does matter. I feel like I was sort of uniquely in a situation to fail in this, because I have the strengths theme restorative, which is, man, you're a problem solver. And so it kind of creates this, like, man, you're the hammer and everything is a nail. And the thing about that is that you don't see which problems are more important than others, or you don't really care. It's not like you probably cognitively can't see it, but it just doesn't really matter because it all needs to be done. And so in that environment, it really, you can be a kid in a candy shop that's just grabbing for every single thing there is, because it's like, man, there's so much to do. There's so many ways you think you can be helpful, almost an unlimited amount of ways that you can be just all constantly, trying. And so really trying to drill down on some of the things that are the most important for someone in my chair, and I characterize them in 3 ways. So if somebody's sitting, they're hearing this and they're a lead pastor, I think that what this may sound like, so I want to guard against this, is, well, yeah, but your church is multi-site, your church is bigger. Of course, those are the only 3 things you focus on, right? But as I look back, really throughout the entirety of Mercy Hill, these have always been the 3 most important things that I have focused on. Now, that doesn't mean I focused on them only. And then there's been a lot of seasons where I focused on a lot of things that I think probably were detracting from these most important things. And in that, we probably didn't go as far as we could have gone, and I think we probably got slowed down by some of that. But basically, and I don't know how far you want me to go into each one of these right now, but I think about the lead chair in a church like ours, organized like ours, primary role, preacher, vision caster, fundraiser. So those are kind of the three things. That vision cast is very applicable to staff, because I think some people immediately would say, like, wait a minute, you didn't even lead your staff in that. And I would say, no, it is, but it's more in a visionary chair to try to keep the vision in front of them of where we're going. So those are the three things I think are most essential. And when I find myself really operating outside of that, there's issues that are coming up that I'm really outside of that, I think I get pretty drained, and I think that our movement doesn't go as far. And I think that I start to step on other people's toes.
Yeah.
Who some of the, who other things are, what I just mentioned is not their three things. They have three other things. So when I'm doing their things, it's kind of stepping on them.
Let's nail down on each of those three in just a second, but I want to I have a question to kind of circle back. Like, I think all leaders go through this journey, and a lot of people have come up against like why this is important, because a lot of times, it's like we end up trying to do the stuff that we should be doing, focusing on the right things, but there are all these different issues and different problems coming at us. And a lot of leaders that have a good bit of capacity, like you do, they just kind of try to balance it all. And a lot of times, for people to learn this, unfortunately, it's not through a podcast, but it's through like having to just learn this in real life,
Right.
And I'm sure you and I both have just like a lot of stories, but any sort of like breaking point or anything for you where you realize, man, I gotta get better at focusing on the right things.
Oh, for sure, man. I mean, I think, and to your point, I think that it's not unique to, church ministry, because you see all these books that are trying, the 4-hour work week, so good they can't ignore you. Like, there's a bunch of books, the minimalism and this kind of stuff. It's like they're trying to get at something, which is, you got to cut away what is non-essential and focus on what is essential. That's basically what they're getting at. And I think, I think for me and sort of in the church world, it's no different. We have had so many seasons where, we are just trying to focus on everything, and it just takes away. They're not all equally important, doing the right thing is what matters the most. The leadership quote, do the right thing. It's not about doing things right. It's about doing the right things, right? So it's like, how can you focus on that? I think for me, it's taking different forms. I've a lot of times where it comes in is I want to solve problems on our staff or small problems with our church, man, our systems, man. There's the kids stuff doesn't look the way it ought to, or something on the website a link on the website is not working. And it's funny because I'm knee deep in a sermon, which matters, but I can't think about that because this link for this kids sign up thing is not working on our website. And for whatever reason, those things always end up, I'm the one who clicks on it. So I know that it's not working. And then everything stops. Mm-hmm. I can't think about generosity. I can't think about vision. I can't think about preaching until that, kids link is back up and working. And that's funny. That would be funny if it weren't so sad, because that has happened to me 1,000 times at Mercy Hill. Early on at Mercy Hill, something like that could derail half of my whole day. Like, I got to figure this out. We can't operate like this. This is not excellent. All the while, it's like, man, a couple more hours on your sermon would have moved the needle way farther.
Yeah. So going back to what you've identified as like the things that are most important for you to focus on, I do think there is this sort of balance between like the particular role that you're in and then also kind of like your talent themes, right? Mm-hmm. Like, as like the lead pastor, I don't think you could say I'm going to 100% focus on counseling, because that's what I like to do or that's what I'm good at. There is something about like the role somewhat dictates what you should be focusing on. You can't focus on that to the exclusion of how you're wired and your talent theme. And so there is some balance there, obviously, but like, how did you kind of come to like, okay, this is what I should be focusing on? And, is there some leeway there in terms of in your role?
Well, looking back on it, I think that we would just say those are three things I've got my hand on that are the most they're the most important. And so looking back on them, thinking about, again, preaching, vision casting, raising money, for our movement here, what we're doing, there's an aspect of looking back and just saying, hey, those are three, it's the Andy Stanley thing. You do what only you can do. Mm-hmm. And I'm not saying I'm the only one at Mercy Hill that could do this, but in my role that, that there is time allotment and there is kind of a lane for me to do those three things. And so I'm the one that needs to do them. And I think they move along somewhat with my talent themes. The way it came about, though, in more of a practical way is, and I think this is really true because you hit it earlier, I think a lot of times guys have to back their way in to what are the most important things, right? You don't just like wake up one day and know that. It takes a long time of looking, having other people talk to you about it and all that. But I think for us, man, as our staff was growing and we're trying to empower others to do executive level leadership, that's when it really kind of dawned on me, like, man, we need to sit down and figure out what are the big buckets for me. And just transparently, when we came up with this 3 years ago, maybe two and a half years ago, I can't remember exactly. There were four. I don't know if you remember this, but it was like, hey man, you're going to preach, you're going to cast vision, which we could talk about that. We're going to, teach our church generosity culture and all that, man, deep and wide with that. The fourth thing was, man, I'm going to try to solve our highest level problems, help with that. Highest level leadership, we called it. There is still some of that. There's elements of that, man. We're like right now, we're trying to build a new facility, and there's decisions that come with that. Very few, but some big high level stuff. If it's at the directional level, I'm okay with a high level leadership thing. But for me, the problem was I just wanted to keep using that as an excuse to dive into everything. And so I'm using that fourth bucket of leadership as an excuse to dive back into, we have a staffing issue, or we have a space issue at a campus, and so I'm all of a sudden my mind is turned right back on to something that is like not just 2 or 3 rungs down from what I should be doing. It's like 10 rungs down from what I should be doing, and there's somebody else more competent and more aware of what's going on that's actually over that. And so it kind of kept gluing me back into like a lower level of leadership. And so eventually we just kind of suspended that and just said, hey, what I really need to think about is those three. And then, even the vision stuff is really where, like, at the highest level of problem solving, it is a vision issue. It's where are we going, not what are we doing.
Mm-hmm. Why do you think for those in particular, like, obviously some of that maybe could be handed off to people in other roles or whatever, but like, why are those inherently just so important for church and like growing your church? You said preaching, vision, generosity.
Yeah. Well, we believe in the preaching of the word. I mean, we've talked about it on this podcast. I mean, just in terms of, we think that's where the max discipleship is going to happen and the max evangelism is going to happen in the preaching event, in the Sunday gathering. Doesn't mean it's the only place it happens, but if that stuff's wrong, the rest of the week is not going to be right. We believe discipleship at Mercy Hill, we say, is word taught, life caught. If you're not teaching the word, there's not a whole lot of life characteristics to catch. So, I think just right on the face of it, if you're going to be in a lead pastor model where one brother is carrying the load in terms of the percentage of the weight in that, I don't know how you could put that auxiliary to everything else they're doing. It's just one of the most important things. I think the second thing in terms of just vision, is that people have got to understand who we are and what we're trying to do, and they're going to understand that in the ways that I can frame it. I have the mic most of the time. I have sort of a trellis that I go through. Some guys do this organically. They're just expert vision casters because they woke up that way and God gifted them that way. I'm not that way. And so I gotta have like some places to do that. So whether it's a quarterly giving letter or whether it's, man, I know right now when our next elder meeting is going to be, when is our next all staff, when any area where I'm going to be put in and have a chance to further ingrain who we are and where we're going. That is going to be something that I need to spend max time on and prep for and be ready for, because nothing moves the needle like that. And then finally, as we talk about generosity culture, we believe at Mercy Hill that what takes the mission the farthest is also what takes the disciple the deepest. So, there's a reason why Jesus talked about money more than anything else. There's a reason why even unbelievers were confronted, or very baby believers were confronted with giving. And that's because, man, when we give our money away, we are challenging the predominant idol in the world. Money mimics God more than anything else. It can give you what only God can give you, closer than anything else. And so we think for our people, man, teaching them generosity, having structure for generosity is very important for their discipleship. It's hard to disciple a believer without teaching them to give. And then also just practically, I mean, like I said, what takes a disciple the deepest takes the mission the farthest. You know, the mission is going to go at Mercy Hill about as far as a generosity takes it. You know, you and I, our directional team, we set the vision of the church, but the congregation sets the pace with its generosity. Mm-hmm. And so if that's really true, I mean, a movement like ours, and every church is not this way, but in a church like ours, there's more leaders, there's more energy than there is money. You know, there may be other movements that are the opposite of that, but for us, there's more young leaders, and there's more energy than there is money. And so, money feels like it's the stop for us. And when we can raise that, our people are discipled, and we kind of bust through walls, and we're able to see the next level of ministry go.
Yeah, I think one of the things that I would draw, because I don't want people to think like this only applies to like a lead pastor role. Mm-hmm. It really applies to any role in the organization, you know? So it's kind of two things. One is like, okay, how do you identify what those core functions are of a particular role? But even before that, I think just like the fundamental view of every single role or each person needs to understand there are core things that you need to be doing that are the most important things for you to be doing. Mm-hmm. And it's really not to say that other people couldn't do it, because that's not really the point. The point is you understand that this is the most important thing for you, right? I mean, it's like on a football team. It's like there's a backup quarterback, there's a third string. There are other people that could do it, but it's kind of like, man, but somebody needs to know, man, this is my core responsibility that I'm doing this. And it's crazy how many times that you have people in different positions, and we all could deal with this, where we can't list the way you did the 3 or 4 core things we're supposed to be doing. And if that's the case, then what I would imagine for most people, it's already hard enough dealing with all the problems when you have those things listed. But if you don't have those things listed, then I would guess what dictates most of your time and most of your day each day is basically just whatever's coming at you.
Exactly.
You know, this problem, this email, and it's not to say that you shouldn't have some time in your schedule reserved for that sort of stuff, but you need to be able to say and identify, hey, if I'm not doing X this week, here is the thing that I know if I don't do it, nobody else is doing it, you know? And it's not because no one else can do it. It's just because there's so much work to be done in the church. Mm-hmm. We just need to have some good focus around trying to identify what are the core things that you need to be doing. Mm-hmm. It's so much easier said than done. Yeah,
for sure.
But I do think churches that do this well and leaders that do this well, there's just a lot of focused energy.
Yeah, and I think what you're saying matters a lot, because I like that quote from Andy Stanley that I mentioned. You know, I do what only you can do. I think there's a lot of truth in that. You want to raise to your highest level. You want to bring your highest contribution to the organization. I always have had a bit of a rub with it, though, because of what you're saying is like, I am not the only one that can preach at Mercy Hill. You know, I'm not the only one who could teach our church generosity or cast vision, certainly. But it is my role. And so, yeah, I mean, I am the one I'm responsible for that. And so if I'm not, who is going to be? So in that sense, I need to be doing what only I can do, because everybody else has a bunch of other things they're trying to do.
Yeah. And so I would say for kind of the next thing would be like, okay, how do you identify, like we've talked about for your role, like how do you identify those things for another role in the church, for my role or for somebody else's role? And I think some of it is just kind of conceptually trying to think about all the things that need to be done apart from any specific people, you know, like generosity in a church is very important. Community groups is very important. Student ministry is important. As the church grows, there are organizational things like HR and finance and facilities and IT and all these other things that are important. And so I think just identifying all of those things that are really important, even maybe before you say, well, this particular person needs to be doing that. And then really trying to help people stay focused on those things that are the most important. It's kind of like, you've done this in a sermon before to kind of talk about just somebody's life, but it's kind of like that analogy, right? Where you take like the big rocks and put them in the jar, you know? And it's like, if you put the biggest rocks in first, well, then you could put all the sand in and all that. But if you kind of try to go opposite, it's hard to do that. So it's just prioritizing what are the most important things. How would you say maybe that we have tried to do this with like other roles, you know, as the church is changing and growing?
Yeah, I mean, I think that one thing I think really helps is once you also have aligned around what you're trying to do as an organization, because without that, you're back into, well, who says, you know, what is the true north? You know what I mean? So for me, I try to think a lot about, okay, not just preach, generosity, culture, and vision. It's like that is connected to, we're trying to see 5,000 baptisms by 2032 and 500 missionaries sent out of that by 2032. And so to me, it's 5,000, you know, 5 and 5 is what I call it. So 5 and 5, the way I'm doing 5 and 5 is preach, cast vision, and help with generosity, right? And so those are the three. And so you probably have more around processes and stuff of what you guys do, but I think from a very high level, it's important that you have student team or you have, you know, worship team or whatever your teams are, even if they're volunteer led. Like it's not, I mean, this is not just like a big church thing. Like you know, trying to pare it down to what the core functions are, you know, you got to attach that to the ultimate vision of what your church is trying to do. And I think I don't know what you think about this, some of the reason why people can't tell you what their 3 or 4 core functions are is because they actually can't tell you what we're all trying to do.
Right.
You know, and it's like, well, if you can't tell me what we're trying to do, of course you can't tell me what your 3 or 4 core functions to accomplish that task are.
Yeah, it's kind of like, I think it's really great you're bringing this up, because it's kind of like reverse engineering the whole thing from, hey, God willing, this is where we're hoping to get to 10 years from now. And now let's reverse engineer to see, okay, if we were to get there 10 years from now, where will we get 5 years from now? Where would be 3 years, 1 year? What do we need to do over the next 90 days? And then what does each ministry in light of that need to do over the next 90 days? Like the analogy I like to use is, you know, I grew up in Florida. And if you're thinking about, okay, either I'm driving to New York or I'm driving to California, having that furthest kind of goal or that furthest vision in mind is going to kind of let you know as you're, you know, if you end up in Texas, you know, okay, I'm heading in the right way towards California, not towards New York, but it's having that ultimate kind of thing in mind. And I like to challenge leaders, and this is like reverse engineering all the way down to like the day to day. Hey, in your role, in light of that 10-year vision, what's the most important thing for you to do tomorrow? And if you can get it's hard to do. It's not like it's easy to do because it takes a lot of focus and strategic thinking, but like, if everybody in the organization woke up tomorrow and they just knew what the most important thing they were to do, there's just a lot of power in that.
Yeah, totally. And I think go back to what you said in the very intro of this thing, you know, if somebody can't figure out that principle, whether they name it or not, if they can't figure that out at 100, they're not just going to magically wake up and figure it out at 1,000. You know, because I think that is the trap. What you said earlier, like people think, well, if the church grows, then I'll have more space to stop just putting out fires and the tyranny of the urgent won't be so crazy. And that is just wrong, man. As the church grows, nothing but more fires and more tyranny of the urgent. You know, and you get, well, you got more staff. Hey, guess what more staff bring? More fires and more tyranny of the urgent. And so I think that instead of saying if it's really backwards. It's like, I think people think, well, if the church really grows, then I can figure out some of this vision stuff and what I'm supposed to be doing. And it might be a little bit more like, no, if you figure out what you're supposed to be doing and start focusing on, that, then maybe the church will grow, And so I would just really encourage people to think, because I could just see it. Somebody saying, man, our church is 200. We have one full-time person, 2 part-time, and we got all this stuff going on, and it's crazy, and I don't have this big church and all that. And it's like, man, to think that is not going to be that same way at 1,000 or 1,500 or 2,000, it's just, to me, it's a little bit ignorant, because we've walked that path, and I can tell you it's crazier as you go up.
For sure.
It's harder to pull stuff off, as you go up. So just really buying into, what are we trying to do? What does it mean for what I'm trying to do? And it doesn't matter if you're 100 or 1,000 or whatever. It's like, what's your vision and how do you accomplish it?
Yeah, I think one of the little tricks that I try to kind of use with people or use with myself is, we all know the feeling of, hey, there's this email or there's this thing, there's this problem, and I know the feeling of, I have to respond to this. Like, I feel the weight of, this has to be done. We all get that feeling. What if we could try to figure out how to place that feeling on the things that are the most important for us to be doing? Because a lot of times those things are more high level and can feel even a little bit nebulous, you're over vision and generosity, and so it's real easy to just, for a week, I'll just check out of the vision and focus on the real immediate problems. But if you can get yourself to feel, oh man, I haven't focused on vision for 3 days. I'm feeling the weight of, that means nobody else has over the last 3 days. If we could feel the weight of that versus always just feeling the weight of the problem, I think that's some sort of breakthrough.
Yeah, it's easier to focus on the problem. It's just much easier to go back to email. And I mean, it's very, I love that. I mentioned it earlier, but in that book, So Good They Can't Ignore You, the idea there in that book, it was a quote by Steve Martin, where he read, and I read his biography. It was like kind of the idea. Well, I can't remember the exact numbers, but the opening line of his biography is, I spent 15 years, sharpening, 15 years preparing. I can't remember the numbers, but 2 years, whatever, and then 3 years in wild success. And his point was, man, there was all this thought work that went in, and they go on in that book to talk about how many people. And I know there's another book, Deep Work, and it's a very similar concept. Why is that so hard for us? Why is it so hard to get into a deep mode? Well, we've been conditioned to just pop email and solve problem and let our day be filled with little fire after little fire after little fire, because it's easy and the resolving of that is addictive. What's really hard is like thinking about for an hour the way you're going to say a new plumb line. That's really hard. And so a lot of us just don't. I'd rather just do the other stuff that's tyranny the urgent, it makes me feel crazy and all that, than put the phone away and get into like a deep zone for multiple hours that I can produce something that's like really valuable.
Yeah, and a lot of times the tyranny of the urgent, it can just make us feel productive and busy and important. And it's not that it's not important at all, but a lot of times it's like not the most important. I'll share one kind of tip to close, and then if you want to give any closing thoughts.
That was my tip. Deep work.
Got it. So for me, something that I've just had to do, and I actually think I am more oriented this way, but I still have just realized I have to do this over the last probably 3 years. I've got to the point where for this could be in personal life, or this could be with family, or this could be at my role here at Mercy Hill, literally having on a one-sheet piece of paper, here's the church's vision, here's where the church is going, here's where the church's big goals are, and then literally, man, what are the 3 or 4 most important things for my job? And like literally putting that in my face every day. So that I can't not look at and see, man, this is what, and even with other people I work with, with my admin, other people, just constant like, hey, this is what I'm trying to focus on. This is what I'm trying to focus on. It's just like something in, because like you said at the very beginning, we don't know how to decipher between all the problems sometimes, right? Like, it's just like, in ministry, sometimes it's like there's 100 problems and you can be involved in like 10% of them. But I think it does something with your brain when you're just constantly putting in front of you, this is the vision, this is the vision, this is the vision, this is what I need to be doing. It enables you, I think, to just kind of then intuitively say, okay, this is what really I need to be focusing on. And never not putting that stuff in front of you, because I mean, you just have to be, I think, a superstar leader. Most of us are not, to be able to constantly just be doing this in an intuitive way.
Right.
You know, most of us just need like systems and processes that actually keep us. And even in our meeting that we have, we're just like trying to force ourselves to focus on what are the most important things that each of us need to be doing.
Yeah, that's a good point you bring that up, because I mean, even early on, I felt like we're talking about stuff with our directional team now that will not happen for 3 years. And the thought of that, us even being able to do that 5 years ago or 6 years ago, is crazy. We could never have gotten that because we didn't have the discipline to think nobody else is thinking about 3 years from now. We need to do that. I need to do that. You know, it was just problem and put out a fire. And, you know, and so now I feel like God has grown us to be able to do some of that. We need to grow a lot more in it, but, it's, you know, it's better than it was. I love what you said. I do the same thing in a different way. I kind of have a vision frame for my life, and you know, I have a rhythm of looking at part of that on Saturday and part of it on Monday every week. So I kind of try to keep that before me. So I think that's really special and good. But the second, or my other tip I would give just to close out, this is totally personal to me. Like, one thing I'm learning that helps me a lot is like, when I'm not working on something that is sort of in one of those buckets, I need to just kind of stop, you know? Like, what'll happen is, it's like, man, either I don't have the energy, or man, my day, I got ahead of me, and it's like, man, I had mapped out a few things that I was going to do for this. I got done, and I got a little bit of time left. And instead of like either going back into sharpening myself around those things, listening to a book, taking off and go to maybe leave a little bit early and go to the Y, whatever. Instead of that, I'll go find a problem to find myself in. And I don't know that I'm like consciously doing that, but I'm walking around the office, and I'm just kind of, it's almost like I'm looking for, I'm looking for a problem to be able to just kind of suck me back down, you know, and get me off task of the 3 or 4 things. So I've been trying not to do that. You know, I've been trying to be very intentional about, like, if I'm going to have time, man, use it to build relationships. Don't use it to like go be a problem solver, because there's other people that's in their lane.
Yeah, that's great, man. Well, I'm going to go ahead and close there. We appreciate everybody for listening. I want to put 2 things on your radar as we close. We have a private Facebook group called Breaking Barriers that you guys can look up. And man, in that group, we just talk about stuff like this, how to help your church grow, how to help your church go, talk about best practices, stuff that we're learning, we're sharing and learning with one another. So I'd encourage you to check that out. Also, we have events related to Breaking Barriers, conference each year. And so you can go to our website and check that out. And we just really appreciate you guys for listening. We will see you next time.